I was 8 years old when I learned that the people who were supposed to protect us could be the ones who hurt us the most. Growing up, my older brother Kirby was my best friend. There was never a day when I didn't want to be around him. While most older brothers saw their younger siblings as annoying, Kirby always treated me with kindness. He helped me with my homework, played video games with me, and even took the blame when I broke things around the house. My family wasn't perfect, but we were happy. Or at least that's what I thought. My father had an older daughter from a previous marriage, Lucy, and my mother had lost her ex-husband in a car accident, leaving her with Kirby. They met years later and built a life together, blending our families into one. But one day, everything changed. I remember waiting for Kirby outside my school like I always did. He was supposed to pick me up, but he never came. The minutes turned into hours, and finally, my sister Lucy arrived instead. She didn't say a word, just led me to the car. Something was wrong. When we got home, I heard shouting, loud, terrifying. Shouting. The sound of things breaking echoed through the house. My father's voice roared in anger. My mother's screams filled the air, and in between all of it was the sound of my brother crying out in pain. When we stepped inside, the sight before me made my stomach drop. Kirby was on the floor, covered in bruises and blood, while my father kicked him over and over again. My mother stood nearby, yelling the most hateful words I had ever heard. I clung to Lucy in fear. She pulled me upstairs and told me not to come out. But I couldn't help it. I pressed my ear to the door, listening, crying. Then I heard sirens. When I peeked out the window, I saw police officers storming into our house. Moments later, my parents were dragged out, kicking and screaming, calling my brother every vile name imaginable. At that moment, my world shattered. For 3 days, my parents sat in jail, and I was too afraid to ask what had happened. But when I finally got the courage to ask Lucy, she told me everything. It all started with a girl named Karen. Karen and Kirby never got along at school. They had a long history of fights, and one day, after yet another argument, Karen decided to get revenge. She bruised herself, went to the principal, and accused Kirby of rape. Our parents were called to the school, and when Kirby swore, he didn't do it. They refused to believe him. They sided with Karen without hesitation. The police decided to investigate before making an arrest, but my parents didn't wait for proof. As soon as they got home, they beat Kirby to the brink of death. But here's the thing about lies. They don't last forever. Karen made the mistake of bragging about her plan to her friends. She laughed about how she had ruined Kirby's life. One of her friends, someone who had actually been a victim of abuse, recorded the confession and took it to the police. The truth was out, but by then, the damage had already been done. Kirby was hospitalized for months. His injuries were severe. Broken ribs, a fractured jaw, permanent damage to his leg, and partial blindness in one eye. Worst of all, he had lost something inside him. The brother who used to smile and laugh was gone. He barely spoke. He barely ate. He would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, shaking in fear. Our parents tried to visit him, begging for forgiveness. But Kirby wanted nothing to do with them. One night, when they tried to sneak into the hospital, Kirby screamed so loudly that doctors and nurses rushed in to remove them. He called them murderers. He said they had come to finish the job. He was so terrified that he passed out from the stress. From that moment on, they were banned from seeing him. I was angry, furious. My parents had turned their backs on Kirby when he needed them most. They had nearly killed him. And now, they wanted forgiveness? No. Kirby moved in with his paternal grandparents, and I spent more time there than at home. Our house felt empty without him. It wasn't a home anymore, but the final straw came at a family gathering. My father stood in front of our relatives and told them that Kirby had run away to a drug-infested neighborhood. He said Kirby had stolen their savings. That was a lie. Kirby had been working odd jobs for years to save up money for me. He wanted me to have a better future. Lucy and I told the family the truth. The room fell silent. Everyone was disgusted. They turned their backs on my parents, just as my parents had turned their backs on Kirby. I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer, so I ran. I packed a bag and waited for the right moment. As soon as my parents went shopping, I walked out the door and never looked back. I took a bus to Kirby's grandparents' house. When I arrived, I told them everything. Kirby wasn't happy at first. He scolded me for taking such a big risk, but I could see it in his eyes. He was relieved. He wanted me there, but my parents didn't give up easily. They came pounding on the door, demanding to take me home. Kirby's grandfather tasered my father when he tried to force his way inside. My mother screamed for the police, but when I reminded her that she had a restraining order against her, she went silent. I made my choice. I chose Kirby. Freedom at last. My parents refused to let me go without a fight. They filed a custody battle, refusing to admit that they were unfit parents. But they underestimated Kirby. He fought. He gathered every piece of evidence, every hospital report, every police record. And when we finally stood in court, my mother looked furious, my father looked defeated, and Kirby stood tall. The judge didn't hesitate. Custody was granted to my brother. I was free. And as a final blow, our grandmother, our mother's mother, who despised her, removed her from the will and left everything to Kirby. Justice. I haven't spoken to my parents since that day. I don't need to. I have Kirby. I have Lucy. I have a family who loves me, who would never betray me. Kirby still struggles with his past. Some wounds never fully heal. But we're together now, and that's what matters. To anyone reading this, if you have someone in your life who truly loves and protects you, hold on to them. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It helps bring more real stories like mine to light. See you all in the next one.